Hey there, guys. One thing that I pride myself on is trying to deliver as best I can truth based on the information and knowledge that I have, and of course, savings. If I can offer or extend any kind of savings to you guys, especially in this horrible, putrid economy, every dollar you keep in your pocket is important to me because obviously that keeps you guys and your family well kept. I'm hoping I get to bring both of you guys this today. You guys will remember the video I put out on the issue that happened with Alan Coley. Remember, Alan Coley was the guy that the YouTube jerk harassed and bullied to the point where Alan felt, in his own words or in his own right, that he was being threatened and that he was, according to him, his life was being threatened. He pulled his gun out and he shot the guy. The guy lived, by the way, for those of you that don't know the story. But Alan spent a lot of time in jail, and he had coverage from one of the more popular, and I'm going to try not to use their name as best I can because I'm not trying to slam them in this video. I'm actually a customer of theirs. But he had coverage from this carry insurance provider. It appears that they were not assisting with his trial because the public defender is the one who actually got him off with the primary charge that he had. Now, his secondary charge was one of shooting in a populated area or whichever. That's what they stuck this guy with. So there is going to be an appeal process where this other company now has re-entered the picture. I don't know how, because it's a criminal charge, but nevertheless, they say that they're going to be working on that appeal. That story brought up a lot of questions. It had a lot of conversation being talked about, and I think it dispelled, at least started to dispel a bunch of myths out there. One of the biggest myths, I think, is that if you possess or you are a customer or a member of a company that's offering some kind of coverage, that it's all the same. And that it all has little things that are different, but ultimately you're going to be dealing with the same type of coverage. That is not true. I've said this in a couple of my videos leading up to this video, and I want to say it again. There are two different types of coverage. There's insurance and there's attorneys. One will keep you out of the poorhouse. One will keep you out of the big house. What good are you to your family if you're sitting in jail? Even if you get off on that whole court process and the trial process, even if you get off and are found innocent, if you've been sitting in jail like Coley was, you've probably lost your job. They don't care that at some point you're going to be deemed innocent. They don't care that you got off, right? I'd be willing to bet that you just don't go right back to your old job. I'm a business owner and I can't just hold somebody's job like that while they sit in jail, and I don't know how long they're going to be there. So it disrupts your life, could ruin your life. What if your spouse leaves you? How many times do you hear that? So you have to understand that we are dealing with two things, insurance and attorneys. They may overlap as far as some forms of their coverage. One might dip into the other side of it, but they're very clearly and distinctly different from one another. There's a company that I have just become a member of last week or the week before that. I think it's 2 weeks ago. And I've been talking with them for almost a month now, since these videos came out, because this is important to me. This is a very eye-opening experience to me. This was a learning experience for me. Did I know that there were attorneys and did I know there were insurance? Yes. I had the misconception that they pretty much were the same thing. And I know some states won't accept insurance, so you have to have attorneys. I guess I just kind of almost thought that maybe there are those types of companies out there so that they can work around those states that will not allow insurance. That is not the case. Their coverage is clearly different. Attorneys on retainer is who I'm working with now. I am a proud member of theirs. I'm working with them as a partner in the industry, and I am super proud of it. And I have gotten to know these guys. Mark Victor, who is the owner, had a conference call with him. I've yet to meet him, excited to meet him, but I've spoken with him a couple of times. You talk about a stand-up guy. This is a guy that not only understands the firearms community and the industry in general, but also understands, more importantly, the constitutional right for us to be able to keep and bear arms, which means to be able to carry and defend ourselves in the need we have to, or in the type of situation where you have to. That's important to me. How many times in the gun industry do we deal with people who are in the gun industry, but they're not gun guys? They don't recognize or understand or follow the Constitution as diligently as we do, even though they're in the business of that. I'd be willing to bet you might find plenty of companies out there, if you dig deep enough and ask the right questions, that don't feel as good about the Constitution and the Second Amendment as we do, but they're happy to take your money. That is not the case with attorneys on retainer. Attorneys on retainer are owned by a criminal defense law firm. In other words, they are not just dabbling in something and having to go out and find an attorney that might take your case. They already are that firm. They can answer those questions when you call them. In fact, speaking of calling them, they have people that when you call that 800 number, at some point, Mr. Mark Victor may very well be the person you talk to. You're going to speak to, at the very beginning of this whole process, an attorney. Probably the first thing he's going to tell you is shut up. Don't say anything. The less you say, the better off you're going to be. I don't care if you're innocent or guilty. I don't care if it's a bad shoot, questionable shoot, or a good shoot. Speaking of those things, the way my mind works, I can't really wrap my head around questionable and bad shoots, simply because if I have to pull my firearm and use it in a self-defense situation, it's a good shoot to me. I don't care how you look at it. I don't care how you have deemed the details of the shoot. I wouldn't have pulled my gun if I didn't think it was a good shoot. I'm convinced in my mind that it was a good shoot. If it were a questionable shoot or a bad shoot, I wouldn't have pulled my gun. I'm not built like that. Somebody running away from me, I'm not shooting them in the back. Why? Because that's a bad shoot. I would not have even unholstered my gun in an instance like that. So it's very important that you understand this. Now, why do I bring that up? Because, now, if you're running around out there murdering people, this is not the conversation that you need to be a part of. But what happens is, in a lot of these insurance companies, if it's a bad shoot, they will not cover you. You've got, doesn't matter how, you can be that platinum member if you want. It doesn't matter. You're not going to be covered. And again, I say platinum because this other company we're talking about, I am a, quote, platinum member. I'm one of those kind of guys that whenever I make that call in an emergency, I've just fired my weapon, I have to pick up that phone. You don't want to call it a weapon. Just know that whenever law enforcement is, if they're talking to you. But nevertheless, if I've just fired my pistol and I make that phone call, I don't want somebody to tell me, oh man, you know, that's the gold package. You got the gold package. If you really wanted that coverage, it's a platinum package. So that's why I bring that up about the different tiers. But you have to understand that when you make that phone call to two different types of companies, you're getting people approaching these things in two different ways. Let me explain. If you call an insurance company after you have to draw your pistol and defend yourself, you are talking to either an adjuster or maybe Bob from India, right? You are not talking to somebody who is A, qualified to advise you legally, or B, who probably even knows what's going on. Their goal is to gather information at that point. Also, if it's an adjuster that you're talking to and not Bob in India, understand insurance companies, guys. Insurance companies, I say this all the time, and I know people who own insurance companies, and I work directly with insurance companies. And one of the companies that I work directly with who helped sponsor my show is an insurance company. But insurance companies do not exist to fight every fight, no matter what the fight is. They exist to cover what they have to cover based on their policy. A legal firm like Attorneys on Retainer exists to fight the fight, no matter the conditions. So speaking of bad shoot, good shoot, or questionable shoot, in the instance of Alan Coley, some of us would call that a bad shoot because he shot the guy and didn't seem like his life was in danger, even though Alan thought it was. We might not look at it like that. So we might call that either a bad shoot or a questionable shoot. Well, guess what? When you call an insurance company, that person, or at least a person really close to them, like the next phone call maybe, will make that determination as to whether or not you are covered. There is a reason why Mr. Coley did not receive an attorney funded by that particular insurance carrier, because they deemed it a bad shoot or a questionable shoot. So they were not involved in that court process. That doesn't happen to you with Attorneys on Retainer. When you make that phone call, you are immediately tapping into the people who can help you. not who need to make phone calls to see if this is something we want to mess with. Is this something that our policy is going to cover? It's going to cover it. In fact, their qualifiers are if you are charged with a crime, whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, if you reasonably and in good faith assert self-defense as a defense to the criminal charge. So obviously, if you're rolling your window down and firing off shots in downtown Chicago at people randomly or because they did not pay you for the dope that you gave them, you're not going to be covered, right? Because that's not a reasonable use of your self-defense weapon. And finally, you have to have been a member of AOR, Attorneys on Retainer, prior to pulling the trigger on your pistol. Those are the only things that qualify you. It's going to be a yes when you make that phone call. You're not calling to ask somebody if they're going to cover you. You know, based on those three qualifiers, that you are covered before you even make that phone call. Now, speaking of the owner, Mark, I felt like I needed to show you this clip. They put out a video here recently about some changes in their policies. These are not fine print changes that take away from your policy and from your coverage. This is something that's pretty big deal. And I wanted you to see what kind of guy Mark is and how firm he stands on protecting you.
We now include misdemeanors. So if you are charged in any of the 50 states with a misdemeanor, and you can honestly say, hey, look, I tried to act in self-defense exactly the same as it was before, my team will jump in and defend you. Everything else remains the same. Yeah, we now cover misdemeanors. Second, we heard some people say, hey, appeals. We want you guys to cover appeals. Why don't you cover appeals? Okay, we now cover appeals. We have lots of experience at our firm in both handling misdemeanors and appeals. We've been doing these both since 1997. No problem. That is covered as well now. In addition to that, we have increased the amount of money that we put towards a bond. It's up from $25,000 to now $50,000. So what does that mean? You get $50,000 towards a cash-only bond or $50,000 towards a secure bond. What does that mean? It means we can cover up to $500,000 of a secure bond. You still got to put up the collateral, but we will put up to $50,000 towards your bond amount. Now, what do you have to do to make this happen? Is there an additional charge? No, you're already grandfathered in. There is nothing we need you to do. Just know that you now have expanded coverage at no additional cost. Why are we doing this? Because I'm not interested in having the second best plan.
I like him. Look, that's real pimp.
I'm the same way. I like that guy. Somebody who stands up for the Second Amendment and people involved in the Second Amendment and trying to protect them, their families, to me, that's to be applauded. And I like the passion this guy has, and I like the way that trickles down to the rest of the staff. I've been dealing with this, more specifically, one of his staff members here recently, stand-up guy. He has all the qualities that Mark has. And I have a lot of respect for organizations whose employees start to mimic the traits and the character of the people at the top. If that's a good trait, by the way. If they're mimicking them because of crappy traits, I'm just not going to do business with them. In this case, I feel like Mark's staff starts to, I don't know if it's an osmosis thing or what it is, but they start to emulate some of the things and the way he carries himself and the way he delivers himself. And that's important because I think ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure you explain, not to convince somebody that they need your product. You're trying to explain what your product can do for somebody. And I don't feel like I'm being sold to when I talk to them. I feel like they are explaining their product, and then it's up to me to make the decision whether or not it's a product for me. Because I'm going to tell you guys, I say this all the time in my videos, one of these will keep you out of the poorhouse. That's typically the insurance company, and it can be the attorney as well. The other one keeps you out of the big house. What good are you if your first phone call that you make after defending yourself, if it's with a company, speaking if you don't have attorneys on retainer, if you call one of these carry type insurance companies only, that's all you have, you make that phone call, if they determine at that point it's not a good shoot, you don't get covered. So you get a public defender to defend you, just like Alan Coley. You spend 8 months in jail like Alan Coley. You have probably lost your job. You have probably lost your wife. There are several things and several people who will not wait on you. You will probably lose your house. Mortgage has got to be paid. Lights are going to get cut off. Cars going to get repoed. Think about all those things. Are you better to your family or for your family sitting in jail until you get out and even get off on the charge? Even if you're deemed found innocent, you don't get all those things back. That's where attorneys on retainer make sure you never go to jail. You never sit in jail. That's super important. I can't stress this enough that they keep you out of the big house. You are useless to your family and to your life sitting in jail. And that's how you stay out of jail. These guys work to make sure you don't. Again, I don't want to encourage, and I hope you don't ever get involved in a questionable or maybe a bad shoot. But guess what? If it's a questionable shoot, you're not at the mercy of some pencil pusher sitting on the other end of that phone call going, we don't think you're covered. You call AOR, they are covered. Now, I'll have another video probably the week after next that I'll put out. I want to show you the importance of having both. I'm not sitting here telling you you don't need insurance. I'm telling you, you need both. If you have just insurance, you're going to find yourself in a bind. You need attorneys also. Yes, it's an added expense, but guess what? What's the expense to your life, your family, and your bank account if you don't have that type of coverage and you spend 8 months in jail? Now, speaking of coverage, if you go to their website, there is a one-time sign-up fee of $100. I told you I was going to save you some money, right? If you go there and use my discount code, you guys remember my discount code. You know it, you love it. I know it, I love it. FTATF. Use my discount code of FTATF. You will get $50 off of that $100 one-time sign-up fee. Again, it's a one-time sign-up fee of $100, but enter my discount code FTATF and you get $50 off of that. So you're only paying $50 to sign up instead of $100. You can make monthly payments of $35 a month, or you can just pay the whole thing, annual payment of $357. I'm not telling you you have to get them. What I'm telling you is, if you only have insurance right now, you're probably making a mistake, and I pray you don't have to use your firearm. I pray you don't have to no matter what. But I hope you are never in a position where you sit back in a really nice, county-provided orange jumpsuit and think back to this video and go, I remember Paul's video, and I didn't get my policy with attorneys on retainer. Check them out, guys.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.
He's so horrible.